Okay, good evening, everyone. It's what is it? It's Tuesday, February 16th, and we're going to have the Avon Grove School Board working session to start at 6:15. So we'll go ahead. We'll call it to order. We do have a quorum. Let's begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Perfect. And if you'd recite the mission statement: to inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. Thank you. Sarah, would you mind doing the roll call, please?
Dwayne Degler.
Here.
Eugene Steger. Stacy Barno.
Here.
Robert Rainier.
Here.
Colleen Preston.
Here.
Deji Akintoy.
Here.
Brian Ladman.
Here.
Kristen Smith.
Here.
And Michelle McRae.
Here.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. So, Brian, I'll ask if there is any public comment for the working session. I'm sure there is for the main meeting, but.
Nothing for the working session. Everything's for the main school board meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Brian, I think you're up first with the academic calendar.
So in board docs was a final draft proposal for the academic calendar for next year. I will share it just so that everybody can see it if they don't have it up or printed out. So we started this conversation back in January with strategic planning. We met with Quest, we elicited teacher feedback, met again in strategic planning, did a couple other conversations and kind of landed on this being what we thought was going to be the best outcome for an academic calendar for next year. I do want to just, before we jump into any questions anybody has or going through it real quick, want to point out that there's still a lot of question marks next year related to the governor's emergency declaration. We have a question out to the Department of Education about whether or not we would be able to continue to implement asynchronous independent learning days for students and still count them as instructional days, kind of like Act 80 days for the school districts, where we would send students home with independent work and our teachers could therefore have like parent teacher conferences, and we wouldn't count those as days off of school, which could impact the last day of the school year. So we still have some, and just COVID in general, it was always just there's a question mark over things. So I think it's important that that we all realize that any calendar that we vote on and pass now may potentially need to be revisited with a potential revision later on, related to some of those outstanding questions. It doesn't necessarily impact the start of the school year, which I think is really important. Parents want to know when their kids are going to go back to school to plan vacations and things like that. But we may have to revisit the calendar if we get some answers to those questions on how it may impact the 2 conference days prior to Thanksgiving break, and then the ones that we have listed in March. So just in a real quick rundown, this has the first day of school being August 30th. Some of the draft calendars that we had the Yom Kippur holiday off, which was September 16th. When we looked at those, the beginning of September, with keeping our tradition of having a 4-day Labor Day holiday, that gave 3 consecutive 4-day weeks for students, the first 3 days or 3 weeks of school. We thought that in-service day is also very close to the in-service that we just had prior to the start of school, and that our staff and our students could probably better use a break in October. And the students would have a 3-day weekend in October, and we would have a staff in-service day in October, as opposed to September 16th and being that close to the beginning of the year. And as always, if there's a family who wishes to observe that religious holiday, they always have the ability to submit a religious attendance note that doesn't count against their parental excusals or anything like that, so they can observe their religious holiday. In service on election day. We then have parent-teacher conferences and parent-teacher conferences and in service the 2 days before Thanksgiving. Students would be off on those 2 days. So they would have a week of Thanksgiving and our teachers would be doing conferences. A half day on the 23rd, which leads us into our holiday break. Our January in service that falls right after Martin Luther King Day at the split of our semester. We also then did 2 days off again for students and a mix of conference and in service in March. Spring break being what it was this year with Thursday, Friday, and an in-service day on Monday. And then it's the sprint to the end. And then we're ending on Thursday, June 9th with our staff coming back a day after the students for their last in-service day. And that would be a half day. And that gives us a 180-day student calendar and 192 staff day calendar. And then just as a reminder, we've been approved for up to 5 flexible instructional days, which we're going to talk about again at the board meeting to clarify some things. But that should give us a pretty good buffer in terms of snow days so that we don't have to tack on days at the end of the year. But any days that we did close school for any reason, be it inclement weather, those would be added on to the end of the school year because this calendar doesn't necessarily build in snow days. That question's come up a couple times, and I don't know if you've had that question about why don't we build snow days into the calendar. It gets a little tricky when we don't have Act 80 day flexibility, and then if we build snow days in and the snow doesn't happen, so like, for example, say we had I added a day off on the 13th of April. We still need 180 days of school. So if I put a day off on April, I would have to move the end of the school year back a day. So that's your plus, you're subtracting a day in April. I have to add it in June. And then the 13th would be your snow day. So if you had snow, our end of school year would be June 10th. But because you would go back and you would cherry pick that Wednesday, the 13th. But if you didn't have snow, you would still have to go to the 10th. So it's kind of like 6 in one, half dozen in another. You can build them in and extend your school year anyways, or you can roll the dice and hopefully not have to extend your school year. So it's something that we've never really done. And then we've always just tacked on to the end and really held on to the published breaks that we have, whether it's spring break or Thanksgiving break is our published break. You can expect those days off. We're not going to come back and, as the winter progresses, leave a question mark over any of those days so that parents can plan.
Great. Thank you, Brian.
Any questions?
Tonight,
or concerns?
I asked to vote for this, so we have to make sure that you guys don't have any questions.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to vote for it at the board meeting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So does anyone have any questions? If you do, board members, just raise your hand. I'll call on you.
Dwayne?
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, so I thought we applied even before all of this happened, the pandemic. I thought we applied for if it's a snow day, we can be remote. Did that not go through or something changed since then?
No, we have FID days. The confusion with the parents is because we're in an emergency, we are allowed to use virtual days in lieu of our FID days, where FID is a little more flexible, where we're giving them a 2-hour delay. We're allowing them to have asynchronous work, where a virtual day, you have to go into your Zooms, you have interventions. And so parents are going back and forth, like, why aren't we using our FID days? And the reason why we're not is because we've been approved due to this emergency with COVID to have virtual days. And so we're using the virtual days. So today at today's board meeting, I'm going to put both side by side, like what a virtual day is in this emergency pandemic and what a FID day is, which we have been approved up to 5. So for next year, we do have those 5 FID days that we can use at any time if it snows.
Yeah, eventually this state of emergency is going to be lifted. Now, they might make adjustments to the school code or the requirements that we have to count instructional hours, but that flexible instructional day legislation was written well before the pandemic hit. So imagine that like none of this is happening. The flexible instructional day model and application that we submitted would be what we would have to implement if all things were normal.
Okay, so but we get 5 of those is what you're saying?
Yeah, you can do up to 5. Yep.
Okay.
And that can be for inclement weather. It could be if there's a building operations issue, if a water main breaks, like things like that we had to shut down building operations, you can utilize a flexible instructional day.
Okay, great.
It can't be used for parent-teacher conferences. So that's where that additional question that we have out to the Department of Ed will hopefully answer that and see if we can get any flexibility on those days. If those come back as yes, we can do asynchronous learning, though that means we can end the school year a little bit earlier if we chose to utilize that.
Okay, let's make sure I wasn't thinking incorrectly. Thank you.
Yep.
Right. Rob, so that you're good with that? Okay. All right. So basically what I heard is because of the pandemic, we can have school with remote learning as a virtual, but once we're out of the pandemic, hopefully next year, if we do have snow, we'll go to the FID days, which are basic asynchronous learning. So that works out well. Any other board member have a question or comment on this? No. All right. I'm not seeing any, Brian. So I think we can table this until the main meeting. And then we'll move on. And Kristen, I'll turn it over to you for your instructional model.
Okay. So obviously I'll just skip through to the parts where I want to go over what we reviewed. I didn't put every slide from Friday because that was a special board meeting for us to go over some of the details. So for tonight, just to recap, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we're not using the attestation form and working with strictly the Chester County Health Department, that we're waiting for guidance to come shortly with social distancing recommendations that might be relaxed, enable for us to move to look at some planning for the next phase. So I do want to review just local information that's happening right now. So Chester County's positivity rates have decreased from 7.4 to 6.2. And the incident rates right now per 100,000 has gone from 136 to 122. Projected incident rates, they would show a steady decline and then move from substantial to moderate. I think this is really important and something we didn't talk about on Friday, but the new CDC guidance, they have said that at any level of community transmission, there are options for in-person instruction, either full or hybrid, for all schools that are strictly using mitigation strategies. That obviously virtual options will still continue for high-risk individuals. Access to vaccination should not be considered a condition for reopening schools for in-person instruction. Even after staff are vaccinated, schools need to continue to mitigate measures for the foreseeable future. So just because you're getting vaccinated doesn't mean that all the mitigation things we've put in place are going to disappear. And that K-12 in-person school attendance is not your primary driver of transmission. We have not seen that. So they are saying that you can remain fully open in the high level of transmission. So with that particular slide, do you guys have any questions?
Anyone have a question? Just raise your hand. Kristen Smith.
I know that this is really new information from the CDC, but now they're saying that you don't necessarily have to quarantine. Have you guys looked at that? The thought of teachers who prove that they have a vaccination card, not necessarily having to quarantine?
Yes. So I brought that up to Jean from the Chester County Health Department, and she said that that will also be within the new guidance. And I think, and Holly's on this call too, and also has gotten confirmation on that.
Yeah, and I believe we were discussing it at work today. It's after 2 weeks of having your second shot and up to 3 months. So between that second week after and 3 months, you're safe not to quarantine.
Holly, did you want to add to that?
Yep, no, that's correct. And on Friday, I believe it was, the Pennsylvania Department of Health did align with the CDC as far as the not needing to quarantine if you're fully vaccinated, which, and I expect Chester County they typically fall in line a couple, a week or 2 weeks later.
Great. Um,
Any other
Perfect.
questions on the guidance or Chester County?
Yeah, Michelle?
Quick question, just a clarification on the first bullet under the new CDC. At the end where you say that strictly use mitigation strategies, do you mean solely using the mitigation strategies versus mitigation and testing, or do you mean that they're using strict mitigation?
Using that you would have to continue to use the mitigation strategies no matter what level of transmission or vaccination, that you would still need to use whatever the Chester County Health Department's guidance is going to be, that would still be part of what's happening as opening fully or hybrid.
Okay, because the CDC is presenting, from what I saw, 2 different scenarios. If you're using mitigation for, I think, like the 4 or 5 points they're talking about, versus if you use on top of that testing too. So this isn't in regard to that.
Yeah, the testing was was another layer that schools were able to apply for, which we have. So that is one of the new mitigation strategies that we do have as part of, whatever, not even the plan that we would plan for possibly in the future, but the plans that we have now. It's a new layer. So all of those, the hand sanitizer, the social distancing, the dividers that we have, those are all part of our health and safety mitigation strategies. Not every school has those things. So they're trying to kind of layer that mitigation strategy, but we do have most of, if not everything that they're asking us, other than vaccinated staff fully.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone, Colleen?
I have a question about Kristen, you mentioned there's going to be new guidance probably from the Chester County Health Department about like distancing and things like that. If my memory serves, which it might not because it's mush, but in November, when we voted to stay hybrid, despite sort of that we were then not following the like Chester County's chart anymore. So didn't we then sort of essentially not follow strictly what Chester County was saying? I guess I'm confused about what guidance we require at this point I understand guidance is always helpful. I'm not saying we ignore what they're saying, but do we need their permission to go 4 or 5 days, or is it we're waiting for the guidance to sort of see where they fall? I'm just trying to just figure out what we did already versus sort of what we're waiting for now.
In the beginning of all of this, we strictly were looking at, you decided as a board that we would follow the Chester County Health guidance,
right?
That color substantial range.
And that's what we did till and that's how we opened in October. Right. And then in November.
And then in the end of November, right about Thanksgiving,
everything went.
The PDE came in.
Right.
And the PDE said, no, if you want to have school open, you have to sign this attestation form that's saying that you're going to follow our guidance, the PDE's guidance, which was, certain social distancing, and that we would follow if we had a certain amount of COVID cases in our school, we would close based on guidance from the Department of Health or within that chart. So that was really based on how many COVID cases you had. Right. Then we looked back and they're like, oh gosh, there's cases now being linked within houses and sports that are playing. And so the PDE said, you know what, if you have a health department that you're working with, you no longer have to follow that attestation form. You can now follow what the Chester County Health Department's saying. So now we're back to go back and follow your Chester County Health Department. What the Chester County Health Department's saying is, we're going to put new guidance out real soon. That's going to give you very clear guidance on, what it should look like based on social distancing and other things. So I'm expecting that guidance real soon. And that's why you see us, along with other school districts, looking to plan. So when that new guidance comes, it's not something that we're planning then 4 weeks later after it comes. It's something that's ready based on what she puts out.
Yeah, I get that part. I just couldn't remember. I thought that we had already sort of said, we're like, I thought that the guidance at some point said, you don't have to strictly follow what the health department says anymore. You can follow what's best for your school and what you're seeing at your school. And that's what we had done.
We
And
did.
so that's where I'm just losing some of the,
Yeah.
like, what-
When the attestation form was signed, that was like you're signing
that
your
changed
life.
it.
It
So
was
that,
like
and
you and Dwayne he signed, I signed, saying that we were following this strictly. So then
Right.
now when this whole thing happened, it's like, okay, you're
Right.
shifting again back to the health department.
okay, sorry, I just couldn't get it off.
Oh,
my head.
Colleen, it changes so often. I understand and appreciate the question.
Thank you, Colleen. Michelle, you raised your hand again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, because we're jumping around all the guidance, it's not really a matter of us cherry picking what we thought was the best guidance. There was very little guidance when we started. There was not these numbers, what we're seeing now from the CDC, and it wasn't clear. So we were following what we had as it was rolling out. So that's why you're hearing that we were following the PD, and then we were following the Chester County. It was because we were looking at what is available to us and what is there. And right now CDC came out, and I believe, Kristen, we're waiting now for the county, was it
Correct.
the county or the PD to
The county.
respond?
Yeah.
So it really isn't that we were just choosing what's best, or what we thought we liked the best. It was what is available at that time. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Correct.
Yeah, no, Michelle, I agree. And I guess I misspoke. Like I had thought that that the guidance, you're right, the guidance keeps changing, and there wasn't sort of definitive numbers at all of the points. And so I know that we were always trying to follow sort of what is out there, but there wasn't always something out there. So.
Great. Thank you,
Hey,
Colleen.
Colleen, I'm sorry, Dwayne.
No, go ahead, Holly.
I was just gonna say in the school guidance document from the Chester County Health Department, even though they reference the, different levels of spread within the community, they also then go on to say that the schools should, that the thresholds are guidance for the schools, and that each school should consider the number of cases in their school community, the level of infection in the surrounding communities itself, in order to decide whether to keep kids in the building, how much staff is available, things like that. So
And that must be what I'm remembering.
yeah, it does go
was sort of
deeper.
like they had their information, and then they said, but also.
But yeah.
That's how
So
all of
that's-
it is.
yeah.
It's all, here are recommendations, but do what you think is best for your own school community, realizing that throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not necessarily going to work either statewide from the Department of Education, or even universally within a county. And that's why you see language in there that is social distancing recommendations to the greatest extent feasible, not 100% of the day, every minute of the day in all instances. It's to the greatest extent that you can do this is what we would recommend.
Yeah, I think the other thing is too that the CDC isn't a governing body. So typically it trickles down and kind of changes a little bit along the way. So
Thank you,
that's
Holly.
where you get the health department.
Thank you. Any other board member have a question? No, not at this time. Okay.
All right, so then we looked at the level of cases that we've had, and we went through November all the way to now, and you can see that we're in that exactly what the health department is reporting. We're at that decline where they're saying within the next 2 weeks, we should be back in that moderate out of that substantial level, which makes sense to what we see. Now, again, even following the guidance of the Chester County Health Department with substantial moderate levels, and then moving into the attestation form, we've never had, I'm knocking on wood when I say this, but we've never had to close school because of our level of transmission. We've always stayed within the parameters. Now, Christmas was not great. And if we were open, then that would have been different. But I think, obviously it was Christmas and people were spending time together. So you see there that dashboard kind of aligns to exactly what the trends and what they're showing. Any questions about the dashboard?
Kristen, I just want to ask, and I think I know the answer. I just want to confirm that of all these cases, if I remember correctly, none of them got to school and transmitted within the school. Everything was external.
Everything with the classrooms, the kids and the teacher, we had one case where two administrators share a close quarter office that we can't prove it, but we think that they could have been transmitted together. So it was one case in a small office. It was no classroom example. We have no transmission in classrooms that way that we can prove. Holly, is that an accurate statement?
It is. And I think part of that that kind of speaks to our success with managing this is we immediately did our own contact tracing and immediately quarantined, so that even though there was a potential link between the two cases, it stopped there because we got the second person who we considered a close contact out of the building. So I think
I just want to reiterate, we were doing a good job, that the kids or children weren't picking it up and asking around and vice versa with the staff. Perfect.
no, not at all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nope, go ahead.
All right, so the goal obviously is that we are looking to plan for more face-to-face time for students with a potential 4-day, 5-day. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. When we're asking for tonight at the board meeting is going to be for us to plan. And it's interesting because I was before this meeting right outside my office, there is a phrase with box letters. It's very big and it says, a goal is broken down into a plan, and a plan then is adopted into action, and then the action becomes reality. So none of this is permission for us to go 4 or 5 days. It's for us to plan so that we have everything ready to be an action or a reality based on what the health department's guidance is as we move into that moderate range. So I want to make sure I'm very clear about what I'm asking for, which is planning so that we're ready, because this is not something that you can throw together very quickly. It's something that takes a couple weeks and does take community support and teachers and everyone surveyed. And that's not what we were asking to do over this weekend to get you ready for Tuesday. It was to make sure that you understand that we need to gather all of that, but to ask those things and pursue those things, we're asking for the board to be on board with us planning such a thing and asking our community these questions.
I think, and I'd like to thank you and Brian making that clear on Friday. I think we came across with that. So thank you.
Is there anything else that you need to understand about the goal of what we're looking to do?
Stacy Barno.
I think it's just also just the clarity that just the statement that you said, and that any further changes to our health and safety plan, our instructional model, would be presented to go further of making any of those changes. That again, this is just giving, determining that you can go forward. But I guess my clarity is that any further changes to the instructional model would require board approval, because that would change our plan, correct?
Correct.
That clarifies. Thanks, Kristen.
Great.
Yeah, like I mean, I know that it's confusing because the administration is in charge of instructional, operational type of things, right? But every phase of this is asking our community to be comfortable with these questions. So, the board needs to be on the same page as administration as we pursue this planning, because it is asking them questions, and it's important that the community understands why we're asking them and what our end result is. What is our end goal? What would we like to see if the stars align and it all falls into place? So that's the reason why we're asking for board approval, so that you understand we're going out in the community, we're going to start moving some of this planning, and they're going to be asked these questions.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So based on the feedback, this is what I've gathered, and believe me, this is perspective of what we're seeing or we're hearing. So as a board, if you hear, I'm not privy to everything that you are seeing or hearing. So if there's more to the discussion, this is just the start of the conversation to kind of get us started. I wanted to bring back where parent feedback is landing and what we're hearing from parents. Obviously, students' social emotional well-being and the need for full-time school is something we've heard throughout the whole pandemic. So that is something that parents are saying. Extracurriculars, I'm hearing that over and over again. The extracurriculars that are happening outside of school and the local businesses that are opening and operating, they don't understand why schools can't be in session more than 2 days a week. School and club sports are happening. Obviously, I said that. Students demonstrating academic declines due to the lack of face-to-face interaction. And then other states have fully opened, and I'm going to preface that with other states and other counties in Pennsylvania are open 5 days, and some have been since September, and that data is out now for people to see too. So I think it's important that this is not something that's we're cutting edge. This is something that other school counties in our state are doing. Now we've heard loud and clear from teachers. They sent out a survey with 125 instructional staff saying 96 responding, which was a pretty good turnout for a weekend. But 70% of them were uncomfortable with more students and not being vaccinated. Now, I'm as frustrated as they are with the vaccine. I think that they should be vaccinated. But we do know that that might not be a reality as we move through the planning. So that's what they said in their survey. And there's a concern over just the lack of vaccines and how long it will take them to get vaccinated. Teachers are also expressing that some students are disengaged online. We've heard that throughout the pandemic. We've heard pandemic teaching is not optimal. We've heard the concern over the workload and more coming face-to-face. That's a concern for them, what that workload will look like. And then a concern over the ability to social distance within classroom and cafeteria that they're comfortable with. Now, as far as the administration, our meetings are consisting of, what is Chester County doing and other schools and what are they considering? Significant number of parents requesting that 4-day. We talked about the misunderstanding around special education students being tested. And if they are and identified that they can do 4-day, which is not the case, but they're desperate to get their kids in school. At Campbellsville in particular, Mrs. Johnson has been trying to get more kids in the classroom. And she surveyed the staff and they just tried to get 78 more kids based on need in the building, and that teachers were okay with for that 4 days. So that just happened. So they are trying to, put as many kids in the building that they can in that hybrid 4-day because of the need, especially K-3. PPE purchases, I can't stress enough the amount of PPE equipment that we bought, and we should be using it, and it's protecting us and it's doing its job. Close contact with the Chester County Health Department. So as uncomfortable as this might be for some staff members or even for parents, this is also something that we know is the next phase of trying. And if it doesn't work, we're in close contact with the Chester County Health Department and would have to go back if it's not working or if we're seeing transmission in the school. Pandemic teaching is not optimal. We all can agree that it is not for everybody. And then just the higher number of students struggling with virtual learning is where we are. So I welcome the board to add to these columns as they see fit, or that they think I'm not capturing accurate statements from groups or additional statements from groups. I welcome a conversation if you need more.
Does anyone have any questions? I know that we did get some information over the weekend. Feedback. Stacey Barno.
I guess, the one thing that's noted under teacher staff concerns about social distance within classrooms or cafeteria, have teachers or instructional staff provided specific instances or concerns that, that they're reporting when there are concerns? Are they isolated? I think I'm looking more at what are the specific concerns. A general concern is not enough to provide abilities to change mitigation. Is it happening repetitively? Is it a one instance of there was a situation? Are we getting more documentation about specific concerns?
I think at this point, what they're concerned about is more kids mean more kids in the cafeteria, where they won't be social distance as far apart as they are right now, and they won't have a mask on, but that shield is what's protecting them. So the more kids that are eating together in that cafeteria space, or even within that classroom, is causing concern. So no specific example that I can say or hear, but for me, it's about more kids and the social distancing and what that means to those areas.
Okay, because I knew that initially there was some discussion about concerns with the existing, but I know that there, to my knowledge, there wasn't further specific instances that had a resolution or it was reoccurring. So that was my question, just a relatable thing to that. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I mean, we went through everything, and there is, a lot of the teachers didn't realize we had seating charts in the cafeteria, so that when there was a outbreak, or if there was an outbreak, we knew which kids were affected. So it was some misunderstanding of what was put in place. Also, I know that teachers were upset with my representation of the hallways. And again, I'm not everywhere. My eyes aren't everywhere, but when I'm in the collaboratory, I see what I see. I did go visit especially those modulars, and I explained to them, I saw it at a good time, but the teachers expressed, that there are other times where it could be more crowded. And I said, well, that's all part of our mitigation with the teachers, right? Like if there's a close quarter hallway and there's too many kids, then you might not be able to let your class go and for 5 more minutes. Like we'd have to work that out. And I've asked them and to do that, because we can't see everything. And so some of those things are going to have to be worked out per hallway, department, and principal. So I know that they worked on those concerns. And again, the hallways will be more crowded if there are more kids. So that will require, that's part of that planning with the teachers of what does that mean in your hallway and what period.
Great, thank you. Does anyone, Deji?
Christian, 2 questions, if you don't mind. The first question is, can you quantify, if you don't mind, the number for administration where it says a high number of students are struggling? A gut feel will suffice. I think the answer is like probably 1 is too many if a child is struggling with something that we can do something about. But could you quantify for me, like what does it mean that a high number of students are struggling?
Jen actually is doing all the summer planning and probably has that right off the top of her head. Jen, you want to answer that?
Yeah, and I think, we can look at this 2 ways. We could quantify it for you to talk about, comparably kids last year to this time this year who's receiving interventions or in need of intervention. So we can definitely pull that if you want those specific numbers. I don't have them memorized for each grade, but I can do that. But I think this statement here is referring more to just a lot of the logistics of virtual learning. And there's so much when kids are at home that we can't control as educators, just them logging on, we can't control, right? And if they're not logging on, or if maybe they're just logging into Schoology later, but not attending the live classes, it's hard for teachers to really know and get a handle on what kids are learning and are they growing. So it's hard to put a definitive number on that specifically, but I know that that's a lot of the talk and a lot of the conversations that the kids who have been in school for 4 days from early on, or the ones that have made the decision to come in, hybrid, are overall doing better than the kids who are at home in a sporadic kind of basis.
And is Ryan on here? No. I know Ryan has some of that information too, but and I'm going to throw out, I would say there's a handful of kids, that are not only struggling, but not engaging at all. They sign into Schoology and then they don't do anything. And mostly, those are kids that are parents that are working, that can't work with their kindergartner or very limited, or it's the high school kid that just isn't doing virtual learning and isn't engaged at all. So those kids are out there. So we're not just talking about doing poorly, but we're talking about not engaged in school. So I can get you those exact numbers though, so you can see.
That makes sense. The other, maybe just a point of clarification, you mentioned under the teacher and staff, there is a concern of workload with more students in the classroom. Just a clarification of what does that mean?
So right now, they have half of their class, let's say there's 8 kids or 10 kids that are in their room, and then they have 10 kids that are virtual. Right now, when more kids come, that might mean more behavior to manage, more hands in the air raising it, that they're trying to concentrate on the kids that are in the classroom. And then the virtual kids, they are taking a back seat because they have so many more things to manage now in the room, where they feel more split, where they're be able to divide their attention. And so just all of those logistical management type of things that they're able to balance and still are struggling to balance, and they can only believe that it would increase. So part of the conversation is with those teachers to figure out what's manageable and to do the survey. How many kids are we talking that are still virtual versus how many are in the classroom? And what does that mean for each of your room? It's hard to say what that workload will look like when we don't know what the number is going to be.
Right, which is why you want to do the planning to find out. That's perfect.
Right.
Rob, you turned your mic off. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm getting back to the teacher staff section. And so what I want to let everybody know, and if you're not on the strategic, on the facilities planning group, like the teachers that are in the modulars don't have the air purification systems that the teachers in the main buildings have. We wouldn't have put those in those because we don't own them. So you also have to think about teachers that are kind of in those situations. And this is just me talking to you guys, the other board members. So I just want to make sure that when we think of this holistically, it's like, you got to think of each section where the modulars, whether you're in the main building or you're actually out at ELC, they're all different environments. And the teachers that are kind of in certain situations, we can't help them with the ventilation and things like that. If we add more kids, is that a problem? So we have such a diverse building situation. I just want to make sure we account for all of the teachers.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, and Donna, I don't know if you can help me, because I have so much information in my head. I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm under the impression that the bipolarizations, they were easily implemented to put in and take out to purify the air. And so they are in all the rooms.
That is correct.
So just to clarify, Rob, they're in all the rooms. I didn't want to misspeak, but I was almost 100% sure that they were.
Okay, no, that's my bad. I'm sorry. I just remembering from all the different payments that we've made, I didn't see the modulars on there. That's my bad. So I apologize.
It's not your bad.
Yeah, no, they're able to be removed from those heating units and put in whatever happens to those modulars. And in the next one, if we moved or put a new modular in or wherever, they can just be removed and put in another system.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
And Rob, just for clarification, when the proposals went to facilities and finance, they came in just as campus. So it was State Road campus, which included all of the classrooms, and Kembosville. So
that was my mix up. I saw State Road campus, which I think of the main buildings versus, so that is my bad. Sorry.
It is all good. Is there any other questions? Nope, I don't see any. Kristen, if you have something else to cover, or
I think, oops. Just the draft. Does the board feel strongly about, we had in here removing the hybrid option and asking the students to pick 4 days and a virtual day in the survey? Would you like to see hybrid in the survey, or do you want to just eliminate hybrid and say you come 4 days? Not saying that this is what we pick or whatever, it's just about the survey. Do you want to include hybrid, or do you want to say 4 days and virtual?
I personally, and I'll speak for myself, would just think that the 4-day would be the new hybrid. And because you'll have that, I think we talked about keeping the Wednesday to clean. Is that correct? I mean, you could figure.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, the Wednesday we would keep just as far as helping the teacher transition for workload and for virtual kids. And a lot of that Wednesday is designated asynchronous, so they can do small groups with the virtual students and with the hybrid students. So if they're seeing those kids 4 days a week, they would use that Wednesday for more small group instruction with virtual students. So you would see more asynchronous work that day. Now, if we could move to that 5th day, that would be a goal, but that's something that would go as we transition or plan in. So I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page about 4 days versus
So I'll look to the board. Does anyone, if you have a concern about dropping the hybrid, we'll just go to 4 days. The motion would be for 4 days for her as we move forward when they get to that point, or virtual.
I don't know what my computer just did, just so you know.
It's okay.
So is
Dwayne,
there
Hold on 1 second. I got two. Eugene, hold on. Brian started first. Eugene, I'll come right back to you. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm sorry. Is there a downside to still offering the 2-day-a-week option?
The downside for the teachers is managing who's 4 days, who's 2 days, who's virtual. For attendance purposes, it just was an extra layer. However, I do understand that there could be kids that say, look, 4 days too many, but 2 days was just enough. I think that, offering too many options can sometimes be confusing. So it was a recommendation that I was listening to from administration and teachers, but I'm open.
I mean, because you potentially still may have students who float in and out of the 4-day depending upon whatever's going on in their life.
Correct.
And they won't be penalized for that. And the teachers still have to function.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree that it would be, I think it'll be a little more complicated, but we're all going to have the final say on this, but I'm not in the classroom, but I think trying to manage a 2-day versus a 4-day versus full virtual would just, I think I would drive myself crazy. But Eugene, you had a question.
Can I chime in? The only thing that could be beneficial, and we had talked about this, and I'm going to throw it out there just as perspective. While it sounds like it may be difficult, and it would be to differentiate the 2-day-a-week students and the 4-day-a-week students, whether they are 2-day-a-week Monday, Tuesday, or 2-day-a-week Thursday, Friday, depending upon their color cohort that's already been given. We have those systems built in Power School already. There's blue kids, there's gold kids, and there's green students who are coming 4 days, and then there's red students who are fully virtual. So all those systems are already built. If there is the potential that if you have the 2-day option still available, so that you're not saying that all families must commit to 4 days, for whatever reason, you might have some families who just choose that they may not want that much exposure, or they've already arranged childcare. There's a myriad of reasons. That could potentially reduce the number of students that would be in a class at one time. So if you have a pocket of students in a class who are only blue coming in on Mondays and Tuesdays, that's less kids that will be physically in the classroom on Thursday and Friday. So it does have the potential to reduce on either side of that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday seesaw that we see, the number of kids who would be physically in a class. Although it would still be, having to plan for 3 different groups: remote, my Monday, Tuesday, my Thursday, Friday, and then my 4-day-a-week students. That's what teachers are doing now. It's just the volume of students in all 4 of those buckets are going to shift if we pursue this, and we're assuming that the 4-day-a-week one is going to be the highest increase.
Because this is a planning document, I mean, we can ask and just assume that if they picked hybrid, that they would go the 4 days if hybrid is something we didn't pursue.
Eugene, you had a question?
No, actually, Brian answered it. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, if this is just for planning and the board feels that including the option of 4-day and a hybrid and a full virtual, if it's just a document for questionnaire, I'll let them decide. We can all decide, but again, that's why you guys do what you do and I do what I do.
Yeah, I think at the end, the parents would just have to understand that if they decided they wanted 2 days, that if it didn't work out if this is what we pursued, if it didn't work out, that we would assume they would be 4-day, if that's what they're picking.
And again, if they didn't like that, they'd have full virtual option.
Exactly.
Any other questions about this topic? Because we're gonna probably end it here. And you're gonna do the timeline, then we'll.
Yep, the timeline was the last one. So it was just about trying to hit those target timeline dates. Obviously, this is a planning phase of what we're asking. So it would be that February 22nd. So next week we would do the learning intentions, including, the questions, and then with the potential after, if we got the Chester County Health Department guidance, we'd have to have another special meeting, obviously, before our next board meeting, if we were going to hit that March 15th. If we don't get the guidance, the stars don't align, then this would just move, and we would keep moving until we got everything we needed for you to make a decision. Does that make sense?
It does. I would like, and I'm sure some others, you'd have to help us define what guidance you would feel is acceptable, or what you would be eventually looking for. And you don't know right now for the March 15th. Do we have a set of criteria like we did in the fall that says, if we meet this, or if everything continues the same, we'll move forward?
We would have to update our health and safety plan and resubmit that. So, and that would need your vote, which would contain all those provisions that we were going to say we were going to meet.
Yep. Anybody have questions on the timeline or questions on it?
Okay.
Again, it's just proposed, and all right. Kristen, do you have anything else?
No, that was really, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable going into the board meeting and make sure that we answered all your questions.
No, you guys did a fabulous job. Brian, do you have anything else? No. And
nope.
Okay. And the only other person I'll ask is Holly. Do you have anything you want to add, being the nurse there, just as a final?
Not right at this moment. I think, again, if we get updated guidance from the Chester County Health Department, it will make a lot of decisions a lot clearer and easier to make. So.
Holly, you want to talk about herd immunity?
My favorite thing.
Please tell them herd immunity.
Herd immunity. So the process of becoming vaccinated, the more people who are vaccinated, the greater chance we have of herd immunity. And then herd immunity prevents the virus from transmitting. It sort of burns itself out. So every person that gets vaccinated, whether they work here or they go to school here or they're a parent or they're our next door neighbor or they work at the grocery store, every person who gets vaccinated is contributing to herd immunity.
And Tasha, do you have that number for the board, or did you email it to them?
She did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you got that number. Okay.
It's small, but that's to be expected.
It's a small herd.
Yeah.
It is a small herd.
Oh, God.
Just saying.
Chester County Health Department is impeding our herd, but we'll get there.
All right. Well, before we get off on to
shouldn't it be a pack?
All right, fine. It's a pack. It's a pack.
Do I have a motion to adjourn at this point, please? Someone.
Brian, I'll motion to adjourn.
We have a second. And
Stacey
Stacy
Barno.
Barno. And Sarah, just for the record, before we go, would you just mark that Eugene did attend the meeting, please?
Yes, I saw that. Thanks, though.
Thank you. All right, we'll be back at 7:15.